Okay, great. So welcome everyone to today's social system mapping deep dive session for February 20th, 2023. Your hosts today, as usual, are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martner. Actually, it was going to be Rebecca Wells, designed this session with Mary and Jim and myself. And Jim and Mary were going to do this, but they both ended up, Rebecca had some sort of emergency stuff. She had family stuff she had to deal with. And so I'm doing it. But hopefully in the future, other people will be doing it as well. Okay, so I'm not going to do what this is because I see all of you are very familiar with what this is. If I stop sharing, I'm just going to see if anyone, yeah. Hi, Ryan, welcome. Do a mic check.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the patience.
The beard looks good. Okay, and then we have Silva. And I'll just, Silva, if you are in and ready to do a quick mic check, feel free to, hi, welcome.
Hello, hi.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and not that it's all that big a deal, but so our agenda today is we're going to do welcome and introductions in just a moment. I'm going to do some background and framing for the session. And then this is going to be a fairly hands-on interactive learning experience, hopefully, as well as ideation experience. And so, as I said, I'll do the background and framing and setup, and then you'll go into breakouts. We have a handful of people who did a training with Rebecca last week for these breakouts, and so we really appreciate their prep time and their willingness to help support this session. And you'll find out who they are in a minute. And so after the break, so you'll do some stuff in the breakouts, and then we'll come back and share some ideas and see what potential next steps we have. For those of you who don't do this regularly, we have the format is we have a formal planned out hour-long session. So we'll go to the top of the next hour. And then everyone who needs to jump off, we'll say goodbye and let you jump off. And then anyone who has more questions or more thoughts or just wants to, hang out and connect, we have an optional extra half hour. So when we're at the top of the hour and we say goodbye, feel free to just stay on Zoom and wait till everybody jumps off. And then we just can go wherever you want to go, prioritizing the needs of the new people and their questions. So that's our agenda for today. Let's go ahead and I'm going to just stop my sharing and ask you to put into the chat for other people's getting a little a tad of an intro to you, your name, pronoun, and location. And once you've done that, feel free to tell us about a network that you are working in or working with. Some of you are consultants who work with networks as a supporting person hired to do that. Others of you are deeply embedded in networks or leaders of networks who have either made maps in your mapped your networks or are thinking about it, learning, trying to decide if that's what you want to do or not. So those networks are being put in the chat, and I encourage you all to take a look at them and just see all of the different work that you're all participating in and supporting. And then what brings you here today? It's my last question. What are you hoping to get out of this session? So welcome, Sylvie. I'm sorry, Silva. Glad to have new people who have a background or have some experience with this stuff. And I'm seeing practical and helping, supporting the community is very appreciated and wonderful, and more practice and more sort of playing with a map, more playing with each other. One of the things we're trying to do, we're sort of trying to start to focus on or enable is more both hands-on actual map engagement, as well as more connection amongst people in the community. So that's introductions. So for today's session, what we wanted to do was to, well, first of all, get you some experience getting your hands on a map. So if you don't have a map, or if you haven't engaged with a social system map, or even if you have, by my observation, a lot of people see them, get experience with a map once or twice, but really having a reason and a purpose to dig in and to really play with the filters and apply it to a question or a problem is, we all need a lot more practice with that. I need more practice with that. We all need to get, have an opportunity to do that with other people, to share what we're experiencing, what we're thinking about. So that's our top goal, is just to get you some time with hands on a map. For those of you who are new to this kind of social system mapping, and Silva, for your, just to fill you in, it's a little different from a social network analysis map. So there's SNA, but there's also a bit of systems thinking. There's also a bit of asset mapping, stakeholder mapping. So there's a lot of dimensionality to a social system map, more so than with a social network analysis map. And so part of what we're hoping is that for those of you who are new to this, that you start to see a potential for your own networks and see what's possible with a social system map. Have a chance to connect with some other mappers and see how a social system map, how we can. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take an example of a network goal. So all of our networks have goals, right? Like things we want to do, or challenges that we're facing, or opportunities that we want to leverage. So and what we often do is have a map over here and our goals over here, and we aren't really practiced because we don't have a history of having this kind of tool available. We're not really practiced at connecting up the goal to the map and thinking about how can this map support this particular goal. I myself, I've been doing this work for nearly 10 years, and I don't do it enough. So, this is an opportunity for us to do that together. To just take a goal, a map, put them side by side and see what emerges. And just to be beginning to think about how can our map support our goals. And the last thing that we're kind of aiming for is, for those of you who have been part of this community of practice and who have wanted more ways, other ways of being engaged than just showing up at these kinds of introductory sessions, this is an opportunity for you to think about, is there, we have a goal, and is there a role you would like to play in helping us reach that goal? So I'll get to that in a moment, but that's the background, is hands-on, connecting goals to map, connecting to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to, as I said, we're going to take an example. So the goal, this is an example goal. And so the goal is that we're going to compare our map to, is we would like to start having quarterly networking sessions for this community of practice that isn't about a topic, that is just about getting to know each other, having a better sense of who's here, creating greater sense of belonging. We do these sessions every week. and they are fairly information focused. The sessions aren't really designed to be networking sessions. We do our best to put people together in breakouts. We do our best to build a sense of belonging, but for the most part, they're for incoming people, new people, to get their questions answered. And so we focus on the information and on the content primarily in these Monday sessions. And I just, I hear all the time how that's not enough, how people want to connect more, how people want to have a greater sense of belonging. They want to have a better sense of who they can reach out to, et cetera. And so the goal is to start to generate more of that connectedness within our community with a quarterly networking session. So that's our example of a goal. Recognizing that not everybody here really cares about this network in particular. Most of you show up because you have a network elsewhere that you're supporting and that you're trying to, that you've got a map, you've mapped, and that's where your primary network connection, relationship building efforts and concerns are. Totally acknowledge that. And if you're in that, if that's you, we're not asking you to step into our network and start doing more than you want to do. We're just using this as an example. So for you, that would mean, here's an example, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be thinking about how I could take this example and apply it in my own context. So that's one piece of the puzzle, is just learning how to do something in your own context. What activities could you do? How could what we do here be applied elsewhere? And for those of you who do care more about this network and do want to be more involved and to help create more connection and relationship, we're also asking you to actually both think about your other networks and think about, as you're looking at this, what we're going through this activity, are there things you actually want to participate in? Do you want to help plan this quarterly session? Do you want to help do outreach and connecting? What might you, given what you see in the map, are there things you can think of that would be a contribution, either to get other people to help contribute or yourself, that you would be interested in? So, okay, so we're an example. So it's both real and an example. I always have to mash up lots of purposes together. And that's just part of how I do complexity, is I try to accomplish a lot all at once. And so, but for clarification, take what you need and get what you need from it. And don't feel like the point here is to serve us. The point here is to serve your purpose and what would help you move forward. So, the core question. Now I'm gonna get to, we're gonna give you links to our social system map, and we're gonna give you we're gonna put you in a breakout with a group with some other people to help you learn how to explore a map more deeply. But the core question that I'm asking you to hold in your mind as you're digging through a map is, if you had this type of data in a map of your network, and if you wanted to catalyze more connections and more self-organizing in your network by creating a quarterly 1.5-hour networking session, how could you use the data in this map to generate action toward that goal? So that's how could you use this data to generate action, is kind of the archetypal question that I'm asking us to hold. And it could be any data, and it could be any goals in a network, but that's the underlying question, and this is our learning example. And
do you have slides that you're needing to share right now?
No.
Okay, just
I'll get. Thank you for asking. I appreciate the interruption, because you might have been wondering. Obviously, you were, so other people might have been as well. And so I just want to say one little piece about, before I share my screen, how, in my mind, how this view that we're going to look at relates to, well, I'm going to just show the screen for a moment, or go there now. So a little background for anyone who's new. This is a social system map. There's lots of different views. There's different ways of seeing the data. I'm just sort of clicking through, and what I'm doing here is illustrating that it's messy, and for a lot of people it can be scary. And I mean, literally, I've seen people start to get a little bit, like you can tell they're starting to get a little tense or a little shaky, because it's like there's too much here, and it's moving too fast, and I don't feel comfortable, because now people are going to be demanding a lot of complexity from me, and I'm not there yet. And so the part of today's activity is all about working with someone in a small group, or maybe just one-on-one, depending on the size of the rooms, to help get comfortable with it, to help you learn how to take this big pile of noise and distill it down to find the signals that you need to be thinking about, or to distill it down into something that is not overwhelming and that is meaningful in relation to your goals, and that you can use and take action with. So the point of the breakouts is to help break down this complexity and sense of overwhelm into something that's manageable. So a little background. Carrie, you can go ahead and give them the embed link now. So if you want to, when we put you into small groups, your breakout facilitator will have gotten themselves very, very familiar with this particular view. We're not going to look at any other views. So for starters, we're just dealing with one view in Kumu. And your facilitator will have gotten very familiar with this view and how it could be filtered or clustered or focused in ways that help us think about the question around the goal. And so your facilitator can drive the map, can just walk you through it, or you can just open the link yourself and do it yourself. I feel like generally the more, like when I'm working with people, I will usually have them do it, and I will watch their screen so that they start to get some muscle memory. I like to sort of make people sort of, it's easier to remember what's going on if you're not watching somebody else whiz through and you don't know what they clicked or how they got there. But if you click it yourself, you'll retain it better. So you have that option. But if it's too much right now to be digging in a map and sort of learning how the filters work, etc., feel free to just negotiate that with your breakout room facilitator, figure out what's going to work best for you. So the point of this view, so how this relates to systems thinking, is one thing I'm always thinking about in networks and in communities is what are people motivated to do? Like, we always have this big thing of like, we need this and we need that, and we want to do this and we want to do that, and sort of like everybody should do this and here's the answer. But there's another way we can look at this, which is, what do people want to do? What role do they want to play? Some people like to do, plan events, and some people just like to talk to people, and some people like to, deal with spreadsheets. So there's different ways of engaging that people bring to any context. And so part of social system mapping is that we're always, as we learn more about our network and what the potential is and what we're trying to do, we learn more, we learn more about the kinds of information that we could be including in a map. And so, so recently, about a half a year ago, we added a new question to our survey, which is, what roles do you want to play? And so all of these are the roles that are available can be selected in our social system map. And this view is showing, of everybody who answered that question, what roles they said they were interested in. So that's the view you can work with. And I think that, unless, Kara, have you sort of figured out the rooms?
I have with just one question. So we essentially have groups of pairs, but then since Richard isn't speaking today, that leaves Seth alone with no one. So we could stick Seth with somebody who is speaking, or we can just see if Richard does want to engage.
Did Stephanie? Wait, you said
I have everybody is paired up, but then at the very end, Seth is left with no one because Richard is the only one left and he's not talking today.
And I don't even see her anymore. Is she still here?
Seth.
Oh, Seth.
Yes.
Oh, Seth, do you have a? Oh, there's Steph.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you should just make an executive decision here.
Excellent. That's great. Then I'm
Okay.
that.
And if somebody doesn't like it, they can tell you about it in the direct message and chew you out, and you can handle that gracefully and we can all move on. Okay. And then does anybody have any questions about the breakout sessions? About what we're doing or why we're doing it or what we're asking you to think about?
How long?
How long?
Oh, well, it's going to go to, so it's going to be 20 minutes. Anyone else? Okay. If I think we're ready for the breakout rooms. Hey, welcome back. I hope you all had a good conversation and felt cool. I'm seeing a few thumbs up, like you had some good connection with the other person you were with. Okay, so let's start with ideas. So what I want to do is have us talk about first ideas that you had for how this could be helpful in your own networks. Like if you had any ahas about either, what data could you gather that you could do this with, or if you had this data, what would you do to move forward with our hypothetical goal, or if your own goals just jumped in and took precedence in your mind, that's great too. So I'll unmute, just go ahead, let's do, raise hands. And if you, let's also feel, if you want to write it down, we'll be keeping this. So we want to capture as much of your thoughts as possible. So feel free to just add things to the chat as well. And I'm not sure whose hand up went up first, Vicky's or Ryan's. Not Ryan's. Okay, so Vicky.
Okay, so as I was preparing for this, for me, it's really important to think about how I'm going to engage just the people who run the network and are doing the things in the network, etc. So I always want to know how can they use this tool to help them create connections. And so we started with I'm interested in connecting with people who can contribute to my project skills, and then kind of drilled down through the various layers in the map. So with different skills, and we found it really interesting, and I saw how different skills, had smaller clusters versus others. But then there's the big network view. It's like, am I responsible for the network and trying to strengthen the network as a whole? And then I might take a very different perspective on it. I might begin to look at how the different clusters or the different roles map to each other. So then we went back to the question, well, we don't know these people. How can we use the few, for example, disruptors in it to connect to a wider group of people? Who do they know? And so forth. So I think that there's just like two different perspectives. I come at it from a kind of big picture, who's in the network and what patterns do I see, where the people I'm trying to engage in this are often coming from a very individual, how can I use this to connect me to somebody I know? So I like to keep kind of both of those in mind.
Yeah, cool. Ryan.
Yeah, I put a little bit in the chat, but one of the things, just my brain naturally goes to clustering things up, grouping things out, and being able to just manually pull answers to these into clusters on the visual of the map and see how that formed some kind of tensions and groupings was really useful for me. Mary and I had a good conversation about like the number and the way that the list of answers had been generated, and thinking about like, is that too many? You know, and it can be, depending on how you're analyzing this data. I don't think it was too many. It actually provided a pretty rich, like, kind of palette for pulling things apart for me. And then the other, we did run into a little bit of just technical issues that are not, I don't think, design of map, but are about Kumu, that are about like, once I have a group of people, how can I kind of take that group in and out of different focuses or zooms? It was resetting things, and that's a reality that we kind of need to think about. So it's like thinking about like, okay, I've kind of found this group and I'm just playing around and I hit a button and then all of a sudden that group goes away and I'm like, oops, now I got to find out. So thinking about how to select those people specifically as you're focusing in and out. And what I've discovered is that Kumu doesn't like to do more than one type of focus at once. There's some other things, that come up. But anyway, that's my kind of first level kind of cut at it.
Thanks. Yeah. Asnat.
Yeah, in addition to everything that everybody said, I just, one of the things that came up in our group of all experienced mappers was that when you see people who are around a similar interest or informal role, but they're not connected to each other, in this context or in our own maps, is it, how do we approach them out of the blue, for example, in a informal call, and say, hey, why don't you, or would you be interested, or are you still interested in whatever? There were different opinions about it. One was like, wow, I'm violating the personal space. And the other opinion was, I'm letting them know that they're being seen and heard. So, and encouraging them to join into that conversation. So I just wanted to add that a little bit.
Yeah. Anyone else? Denise.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just off of what Osnat was saying in that group discussion, because Laura and I were kind of talking about the outliers as well, but I would probably lean more to it's letting people know that they're being seen and heard. Because I also think if you signed up for the map, I don't know how much privacy you were hoping to protect, but I thought, oh, that really means that, oh, it's a reminder, I should update my map, which is what Laura and I were talking about before and after, like we would do this network weaving, the network engagement, to have people update their connections to make sure that they are connected or not. So I was thinking that that would actually be good, and that would remind people, oh, maybe I should go back to my map and do the same thing. But I also just wanted, I don't know if Laura wants to jump in terms of the technical aspects. It wasn't so much what Kumu does or doesn't do, but we found the colors on the legends are very, very similar. Like, it's kind of hard just visually to make, like, it seems like there's like a red and then a soft orange. So I don't know if the colors on like some of the connections could be a little bolder. And then Laura also noted that the font size for some of the boxes was different. Like, those were just small things, but they were, I just thought we could mention it. And then Laura can talk about some of the other stuff. We had kind of fun. Laura knows how to use the map as well. So we were just playing around with ideas. And I think one of the things, though, that would shape how I investigate the map is the purpose of like what we were trying to accomplish out of the quarterly meeting. Because even with the outliers, Laura was looking at it one way in terms of, and I'll let her talk about it, who we should invite, but I was looking at the outliers and thinking, well, if there are people in a cluster who have the same interests but don't know each other, should part of that engagement be setting up one-on-ones that they meet each other within it? But I don't know what the meeting would be about, or does this also help us shape what the meeting will be about too? But that's it. You can go, Laura.
Oh, yeah, Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it was an interesting start, maybe to say, I think we mainly took two perspectives looking at the map and in relation to these quarterly sessions. One is to see who could maybe be people that have an interest and skills to host these sessions. So that was one question we explored further to look at, you know, they've selected roles like a connector or facilitator, you know, which would be really relevant. They've said they're willing to offer skills around, you know, communicating the value of maps, bringing people along in the process. So we did a few like selections on this and found, I think, like 5-6 people that are like the most concentrated around roles and skills that are relevant. So that would be a potential use to then, you know, invite them, like pitch the idea to them and ask them if they're willing to, you know, host a session, you know, once or twice a year or something. And another thing we looked at is, okay, of course, we can also use this map and specifically this view during these type of networking sessions as well to see who's already connected or not, you know, who maybe have a shared interest. So I think this was like two main things kind of that we explored together in the breakout session. And I think, yeah, getting more clear on and we also thought about like, yeah, updating especially connections before and after the sessions, and then we could have, you know, like a time view about how, you know, after each session and after 1 year that changes. So that's I think another option to just see the impact of the sessions. And depending exactly on what the goal is, you know, is it more about connecting like
Oops. Laura,
then we could use the cluster. Yeah.
yeah, you're freezing.
Okay, I turned off my video.
Okay.
Hopefully
Yeah.
you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, to preset some spaces for people that are more have shared interests or something to connect. Also potentially connecting people that, you know, have no connection so far, as I've indicated in the map. Exploring personal profiles in the map before you actually talk to people, you know, and, you know, I have some questions maybe already based on reading the profiles. So there are a bunch of ideas. And I think also depending on if we want to just broaden connections or deepen them, that would also change the setup of the sessions. No, it could be like a lot of one-on-one connection time to like deepen connections, or it could be like almost more of a speed networking type setup where you meet like a bunch of people for just a few minutes. So I think this is, it brought up a lot of questions basically.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Seth, let's do a brief one and then I want to go to another. So one more, Seth.
Okay, just so briefly, I was surprised and pleased to see the perspective that we shared in our group. And since then, I think also Vicky addressed this about the difference, or about the different ways of looking at it, whether you're trying to create these connections from a network weaver perspective or the network manager type thing versus enabling people to do it themselves. And I think that there was more emphasis than I had expected, but I think that I need to pay more attention to the role of the network weaver. But I was really looking at it more from the self-service perspective of, you know, how are people going to feel safe and invited to connect with one another without human intervention. And I think that both of those are a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I'm hearing lots of multiple perspectives going on. So it's like, how do I fit in the system? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we deepening or broadening? Like I think every one of you sort of pointed out some differential perspectives or goals or purposes related to how you would move forward with this, which is great because it's part of, I mean, that's a huge piece of systems thinking, is looking at things from different perspectives. And just that this is making us not just approach the map from the ways we normally would, from the here's how I would normally do this and what I would normally do, but to start to hear from other people and start to see, oh yeah, we could get really dizzy looking, from all these different perspectives, and that helps us think more clearly about what is it we really want in this moment, and how do we aim for that. And so another piece of this is our thinking for this session was that the whole design, the whole thing, the whole goals of this networking session will be defined by a group of people who step in to do this. Rebecca will hold the space. Rebecca will follow up and help coordinate the whole thing, but that it will be joint, it will be co-created, and I'm not going to carry it. So the goals for the session and what's the foregrounding of it, what's the actions, what's the purpose, all of that will be defined by whomever wants to step into this space and do it. And if nobody else does, Rebecca will do it with some, input from probably Mary and Jim and I. But so just the question now is, who actually would like to play in this experiment with helping us to design and generate and catalyze the first, just one test monthly or quarterly networking session. And so anyone who is, I'm going to just ask you to put it in the chat. And this includes recognizing that some of you may want to help in one way and some of you may want to help in another way. So we're going to work at figuring out how to enable each of you who wants to do anything to do the part that you want without having to get weighed down by going along with the parts that that other people want and you're not as psyched about. So continue to please put if you're interested in the chat, and then Rebecca will follow up. We will now do our goodbye ritual to honor the top of the hour, which means for those of you who are new, I'll count down in just a moment. I'll count down 3, 2, 1. Before I do that, please unmute yourself. And when I get to 1, we just all give each other our blessings and our greetings and our well wishes and appreciation to go on with your day from this time, so that we have a nice sense of closure, which is what we're aiming for everybody. So if you unmute, ready, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.
Today.
Bye.
Hope you all have a wonderful week.
Bye.
Love to everyone.
Bye.
And then, as usual, anyone who wants to continue the conversation.
Can I jump in with one question, Christine? I don't think I can stay a lot longer, but
Yep,
one
no,
thing
fine.
that's really up for me as a question, and you said that in the beginning about what are not trying to make people do something, but connecting with what their motivation is. I think this is an essential piece around network engagement in general. No, a lot of this is on free time, volunteering efforts, different time and capacity scales of people. So if we're not getting better at connecting in where there is more juice for people anyway, it's a struggle, which is probably not going to have a lot of outcomes. So keeping that in mind, I think this is an interesting piece for me, also for networking sessions. Like, what would people show up for?
Yeah.
And I think and designing sessions that deliver on that. I mean, it's impossible to meet everybody's needs 100%, but finding that kind of sweet spot in that, I think is something that I have in mind. And also, I think in one of the networks that I work with, I found an interesting tension where on the one hand, people say, I want to connect more with each other. There are a bunch of people I don't know, I want to connect more. But at the same time, if it doesn't have a focus or a topic, it's just about connection, many times attendance is very poor.
Yeah.
So these are two, basically even contradicting dynamics. And I was just wondering if anybody had that experience and found I don't know, some insight about this, because I think it's quite an interesting situation where people kind of, it's I want to be more connected, but also I don't really care to show up unless, you know, the topic hits like a real sweet spot where, you know, my motivation is high. I don't just randomly come to any and all calls. So
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting piece. And I think it's probably, I don't know how much is relevant also for this community of practice. Maybe some people would show up anyway, but I think we probably also have some in the community here.
Yeah.
Where they might have a similar kind of tension.
Yeah. Well, and from my perspective, those of us who show up here have been part of networks and doing this kind of work for, you know, a significant amount of time. And so, like, for me, I'm overconnected. I'm not looking for more relationships that are just about relationship and just about connection. I'm looking for purposeful connections that move forward something that I care deeply about. In this case, it's social system mapping, but I've come to think you're right. At first, people just want to be more connected, but eventually they want to be connected around purpose. And if we're not super clear what the purpose is, as we're designing a session and as we're doing this weaving, like what is, so the purpose for this meeting or the purpose for this team or the purpose for this ongoing session, and make sure that everybody who's showing up that's what they would show up for. So I think that whole show up for it, but again, it's attention. There's different perspectives. There's, you know, there's that, like, it's complex. Yeah. Seth.
I think, Laura, you very, very nicely described my own relationship with this community. Because I do want to have greater connections. But I find myself, for me, on Monday mornings, it's very difficult for me to find the time from my work schedule to plunk an hour down on this. I'm glad when I do, but it's always a tension. And so I often do want to know what the topic is. And I often can't attend even those that I have an interest in. So, you know, even if it's an interesting topic, I still may not be able to do it. But because I feel, you know, a constant tension between, you know, doing my own Monday morning day job and coming into this meeting, despite the best of desires and motivations, it doesn't always happen. And so one of the factors that goes into my thinking is, what's the topic? And that's why it's difficult, because often you don't know the topic ahead of time. I mean, that's just an administrative challenge, and I'm not, you know, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that things are. And so my participation has been sporadic, but it is what it is. And I still have no other community that I feel more is a part of. You know, I feel I'm a part of the tribe of this community, even if my participation is not constant, because it's people that speak the same language, and I'm very grateful for it. So I think that the tension you described is, I think, a very common one, and I'm not sure how to address it, but I think it's very real, and I think it's a good insight.
When I think of it, you know, this question of belonging that you kind of put out and centered at the beginning of the session, Christine. And then I think, well, is the belonging serving, are the relationships serving the purpose, or is the purpose serving the relationships? And, you know, I think when we flip those sometimes, then we probably get that richness. And because, like, I show up for the purpose, it's the juiciness of being able to connect with people who kind of understand what a social network and I can learn from. So for me, it's a lot about a learning opportunity. But I also want to be comfortable. I want to feel like, you know, I have a voice, etc., which is part of the belonging piece. Yep. So I think that's finding different ways to balance it and to say, well, are we here today for belonging, or are we here today for purpose? And those two interact in a way I think that we can play with.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
I want to think a little bit more about the self-organization stuff, and should we self-organize, and should people in the map be encouraged to self-organize around their own topics, or is that too unfocused and we need to follow a certain path?
So I'm hearing that as a, I mean, in this last year, I know some of you know this, there's been just a lot of year and a half, two, since the beginning, but it's getting clearer, and the tensions around it have gotten more articulated in me, but tensions around sourcing this community of practice, being the founder and the leader with a very, very strong vision that is very principled and very specific, even though it's big and complex and mammoth sized, but also very, very specific. And so that me carrying that, and me as I'm carrying that, like the energy that I put into it and the capacity I have to carry it, you know, balanced against self-organizing and liberating everybody. And so that has, you know, been a tension in me for a while, and I've been sorting through it. And I feel like we're at a point where it's getting clearer how to hold both of those at the same time, how to work in a way that both, because I'll just say, for me, it's about the purpose. And I have so many relationships in this community, and I'm not looking for more connections to me. Like, me having more connections doesn't actually necessarily serve the purpose. And so I'm holding the purpose. How do we be clear which is which? Are we working on purpose? Are we working on belonging? Are we working on shared skills? What are we doing? And anyway, I thought I was going somewhere, but I just wanted to say, this year we are activating more of the community with more clarity around what's in, what's out, what's, you know, what is the purpose, as well as what is the culture we want to be creating, and taking more of that off of me. And so expect to be asked for more, expect to be invited to more, expect to be able to contribute more than we have in the past. So I'm just saying our patterns are shifting, and this is a key year in those shifting of patterns, whether this, you know, what we're trying to catalyzes or proves itself to be just a pipe dream. And part of that is taking me out of a certain, not decentralizing me or removing me from my role, but shrinking my role down to the appropriate place and letting other people have other roles in relation to that. And that was all really vague, so sorry. But Vicky, I see your looks like you're vocal.
I'm unmuted. I was just saying that if we look at the map of the community, right, you see that right off, you know, First Street's right there in the middle. How do we create patterns that are supportive of that role and begin to get more of a multi-hub community of practice? So it does sound to me like if we could start cultivating some of the hubs that are in the network, maybe we should be having separate meetings than just one community of practice meeting.
Yeah. That was part of what I was wanting to say is, for me, the Monday morning sessions are not going to change, because they are for the general public to get a taste of social system. They're very purposeful for new people. And you know, so often people say, do something different or do something more. And I'm like, yeah, but I've got to hold this space until someone else steps into it. This is the space I'm going to continue to hold. And if anything more is going to happen, it has to be also fueled by other people's energy. And that space isn't primarily connect me to my tribe space. It's primarily give me some information and teach me some basic stuff space and inspire me space. Yeah, there was one other thing that was popping in my head, but I see other people's faces wanting to say something.
So is there a way to send out a message to clusters, or do you have to individually pick people's emails and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the improvements that could be made.
Yep. It's on the road. It's on the roadmap. Seth.
One of the roles that I've seen you play, Christine, on the Slack channel has been to call out a couple of people to respond to something that someone else has asked for, and that's playing the connector role, which is great and has been very effective. And it's brought me into conversations I wouldn't otherwise be in. But I haven't seen anyone else play that role. And like you have the grace to play that role because everyone regards you as being the leader of the group. And I think that it would be great if some of the other folks might want to think about helping to create those connections, just looking through the communication on Slack or the communication implied through the mapping as well. And just take some chances of trying to connect people, either a one-on-one kind of connection or a cluster connection, as it's been implied here, so that other people could start to do that sort of connecting, and let's see what happens with that.
Yeah.
It was great that when Rebecca put out the call that so many of you responded. That was a good example of wanting to do something within the community of practice and putting out the call. Just in my experience over the last few years, there was someone who was in a period of transition, and she came to one or maybe a few sessions, and she set up 20-minute like coffee conversations with, about 5 people. And I thought the 20 minutes, that seemed successful. It wasn't, when we talked, it wasn't a lot of time out of my schedule, and it was just enough time for her to just learn a little more. I think the informal roles open up a lot in that respect, in terms of people connecting, of seeing people in their wholeness a little more, rather than their professional role, to see other sides of someone that would motivate me to connect with someone. So when I look at the map and think of the session, I think of it, the question for me is different people of, I would think about artists and storytellers and space holders, different people. And the question is, how much difference would create a really vibrant session?
Yeah, Laura.
I'll share a few more thoughts because before I also have to jump off. I think one piece, Mary, that you said, which I think is really strong for really like deeper connection and belonging, is one-on-one time. And one-on-one, even 10 or 20 minutes makes a big difference than just a group setting. So I think if there's a focus on connection and belonging, I think one of the easiest kind of process opportunities is really enabling one-on-one time, whether that's as part of a bigger session or separate. So I think that's something for this specific goal that I think the experience really shows quite clearly. I think it's also interesting that sometimes if somebody puts in a bit of coordination effort, other people might be willing to support in a small way that then is kind of amplified because it's coordinated, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's taking an initiative to do a bunch of things and I just contribute like an hour with some things,
Yeah.
you know, that might have a much bigger impact than just me doing an hour uncoordinated, right? So I think this is an interesting dynamic also that we can see in the community a lot. And also to see sometimes, I mean, the coordination effort could be also kind of making it a challenge. Like, can you reach out to 5 people and we make it like a playful challenge, you know, and you like somewhere on Slack and you mark it if you've done that, you know, even that can kind of be a coordination effort where then it becomes visible. And I feel, oh, it's not just me randomly, weirdly reaching out to connect, but I'm actually part of this kind of playful thing we're all doing, and you get a bit of peer, you know, support / competition, whatever. So that's, I think, another like human behavior element to that as well. And again, the sense of my little contribution makes a bigger difference because it's coordinated even in this kind of play. So that's another thought that comes to mind. And just to speak about the goals and purpose, and also Christine, what you shared around, you know, not just connecting for connection, but connecting for purpose or value flows is maybe another way to frame it. I think that's an interesting piece to see. And I think especially relevant for people who already know some in the community. For very new people, they just need to maybe be connected. So I think there's a different need also on that level probably. And the other element that I see that these sessions can do is also be part of kind of cultivating a shared understanding of how we relate or work together, which is also part of this whole idea of system transformation, right? And I think this purely social time, so to speak, can actually be also a lot related to value and culture and ways of relating. So I think this is also one way to at least have 2 purposes kind of tied up together in a way. Besides maybe an extra one on, you know, more specific values or collaborations that might be sparked. So I just wanted to share that as a few more thoughts. It's been really great to reconnect. Thank you everyone for your contributions as well.
Take care.
Laura.
It's great seeing you, Laura.
Bye. Cindy.
I just want to say the same thing that she just said. I had my hand raised before she said what I was going to say, but since I'm a retired 8th grade teacher, I just give homework I just say, all right, you guys, it's your job to contact, well, first of all, they have to contact their people in their neighborhood, but they have to get to know other coaches. And so I do a gardening thing if you didn't see mine, but yeah, so I just give it as homework, and that's maybe a little too bossy. It's not Christine's style. Like, you want to? I'm like, nope, you got to use the network. And so I don't mind being bossy.
Well, I think one of the things one of the things that what you're pointing to is if people have stepped in and said, I want to have a role, I want to play a certain purpose and, you know, have a certain purpose in this context, then it's fine to say, okay, if you're going to do that, then you need to reach out, etc. We haven't had the distinction of around engagement. So everyone has been episodic and everyone has been equal in our understanding of their place in the community. And I am not willing to tell everyone to do anything. With everyone, I leave them ultimate freedom. Mm-hmm. But so as we start to distinguish, these are the core people, and this is what, if you want to be a leader in this community, then there are certain things that, yeah, you got to do, or certain rules that you got to agree to. But we've never had those containers defined. And so I haven't felt like I had permission to go there. And now we're getting those containers defined. And so now I'm feeling much more strengthened to have the permission to go there, and I'm getting much more bossy with the people who have agreed, that they're willing to let me lead. But until I get their permission for them to say, yeah, I want to support your vision, and I want you to help us get there. I didn't have the courage to do that. And there's one more thing I want to say to Stephanie before you jump in, which is I think that what Laura just said about coordination is huge. To me, leveraging our activities by making it with ripples is like, I'm not personally interested in putting energy into things that don't ripple, and coordination helps to ripple, but also reporting back helps to ripple. So if we do a session and then somebody tells a story of what happened or what we learned, or lets us know that this did happen, like we two had a conversation and it resulted in X. Like, so the storytelling piece or the sharing back is another piece of rippling, which I think we're still sort of trying to figure out how to make that a part of the community practice. But for me, like, everybody can do whatever they want, they can connect, but if it's it totally invisible to the rest of the community, it's fine, it's great, it's marvelous. But what I'm looking for is the things that will ripple and that will reverberate and resonate. And so that's coordination and storytelling. And my experience is we don't have enough coordinators or storytellers who are interested in this community.
No, there's three.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's when Rebecca showed up and said, I like to coordinate, and she like started pushing for actually things she could do right away. I was like, whoa, this is like, this is big. Anyway, yeah. So Stephanie.
Well, I was just going to give a story from my experience from the 2016 Bernie campaign. What made working on that so wonderful is they totally understood how to make you feel belonging from the very beginning. Your purpose was absolutely clear. There was no ambiguity. So that clarity of purpose is so powerful. But one of the best tools they had that I myself am trying to figure out how to replicate was their onboarding process was so clear and so powerful, was not overwhelming. They basically said, what are you comfortable doing? Are you comfortable sending texts? Are you comfortable doing emails? Are you comfortable doing stand-up work and doing a barn raising kind of a thing? Do you're trained facilitators? And so you identified one of those three things to get you started, and you were immediately linked up with all sorts of written materials on how to do whatever you chose and a mentor to help you. And so you got on the path real quick, real easy, totally prepared. You didn't feel in over your head. You had a coach. I mean, how amazing is that? And then you found that the more you did, the more you could see there was to do. And the reward of that is the more you saw behind the curtain of Bernie's campaign. So by the end, I was looking into the living room of some of his key organizers, these young students that had no furniture, nothing on the walls. But it was wonderful. And then for the community part, they organized us. I lived in Texas then. So there was a call once a month just for people from Texas. And you can imagine working for Bernie in Texas is its own unique deal. So you'd be able to get into small groups with people from other cities and kind of commiserate about how that was. And they did the same for California. And so then you'd get on and say, okay, California made phone calls for Texas when we had our primary, right? Now it's your turn to make phone calls for California. I mean, it just made it so personal. So I keep thinking of that notion of having a Bernieverse of people, I call it, because I ended up doing conflict resolution work for the senior team in the state of Colorado, because once they got him to win the primary, they kind of lost it because they had to reorganize what they were doing and they got lost. So the Achilles heel for the campaigns is they don't have these kind of conflict resolution skills. So my current network thing I'm trying to do is link activists on the ground to people like you and others who have these skills of how to have a different kind of conversation. Because being an activist is hard work. It almost never pays anything. So how do we take care of those people who are on the ground with these skills that we know and love so that it's easy for them to onboard together? I did a little work for Boeing once, and they told me the most amazing story that relates to this. He said, one of the engineers said, Stephanie, the Boeing 737 was the first plane we ever built that fit together the first time. The very first time it all got put together, it worked. I said, for one, how could that ever be true? But I said, for two, how in the world did you make it happen? And he said, well, we got this new software so that if I was working on a wing and I had a related thing trying to balance the size, the temperature, the whatever, I could mouse over that part of the plane and it would show me the name of the engineer who was specifically working on that exact part. And I could talk to that engineer directly to negotiate what it was I needed to happen with what he or she needed to happen, right? You could see the system. That's what that software did. And that's what we need for those of us who want to create a shared future that works for all beings. And I'm convinced that if we can see each other through these networks, bing, 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 I can look for exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking to support a young activist in my town, blah, blah, blah. Anything I want, I can look for. But to your point, Cindy, we've got to take responsibility for what is mine to do, and I'm going to find the resources for me. So part of the network role for me is making people clear that personal responsibility and helping them get clear on what their part is.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm
Appreciate
complete.
it.
Yeah. And we've got just 2 minutes left. I'm just pointing.
Yeah, say goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephanie, that was awesome. That was a good speech. I like it. I might have to keep it. I wrote down some of your quotes.
And what was popping into my head is, for this community of practice to get to that kind of a point, somebody other than me needs to say, I'm going to figure out what an onboarding system looks like. And I'm going to figure out how we can make it that easy for new people to spend 5 minutes getting engaged and feeling connected. Somebody other than me has to collect these ideas, think through how they fit in this context, because the Bernie context is a super different context than this context. And so I'm just going to keep pushing on great ideas. And if we want them, if we actually think they should be part of this community of practice, somebody other than me has to help catalyze them. So just to push
Here.
personal responsibility. And if anybody feels excited about that possibility, then please put it in the chat or reach out to me or Rebecca, because we're working. That's what we're focusing on, is making those things possible. So that was my maybe heavy-handed bossiness at the end there.
Well, you're telling it like it is from a place of discernment. That's what you did, Christine. I mean, it can't all be you.
That sounds like one of my titles.
Yeah, chief discerner.
Telling it like it is from a place of discernment. I like the whole thing. Thank you all. It was great to see everyone. I'll see you all in the next places we all show up. Or as
Yes.
take care. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.